Michael, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for that overview. Let's talk a little bit about markets and about the financial value of art. We've been reading a lot in recent months about how the art world is in a precarious state as it heads into the second half of 2025. There are, as of this summer and even more recently, there have been some prominent gallery closings. Smaller galleries are finding overheads too high. The cost of participating in important fairs is also eating away at margins. It's really forcing a shift in the market. I suppose you could say consolidation in some ways. Auction sales are down, in some cases dramatically compared to 2022. Primary pricing is often too high. Major collectors are reducing their spending. And I wanted to ask you, in your view, how significant is this current, shall we call it downsizing or a downturn, and when do you think we may see the bottom of this?
Well, good question, Derek. I used to adhere to a notion that the art market was cyclical. Mm-hmm. And for quite a long time, the cycles seemed to be about 10 years. So the early 70s weren't great. The early 80s weren't great. The early 90s were terrible, right? 2008 was bad for obvious reasons. And I think that circle has turned into an oval. And I think that we have had a very long run of a strong market. And when I say market, I'm really talking about what the media concentrates on, which is not regular folk paying a few hundred or a few $1,000s for a picture at a local gallery, but that is actually 90% of the $65 billion art market, but it's completely ignored by the media because it's not sexy, it's not interesting. But that kind of cream along the top, we've seen, I think because of the availability of money, more than anything else, two things: the availability of money and the movement into the world of art of people with a great deal of money who have seen it as nothing more than another way to park or increase their money. They've not been interested in art for art's sake. They're interested in art for money's sake. They've had a lot of it. They have a lot of money. And so they have supported a balloon of inflated prices for living artists, contemporary, some quite young. Nothing against them. I'm not saying good, bad, or indifferent, but the prices have become, you're paying millions of dollars for an artist who wasn't even on anybody's radar 5 years ago, and you're paying more than you would for a Cézanne watercolor. I mean, it wasn't right. It didn't seem right. So that is something that a number of us were looking each other in the eye over the last few years and saying, this cannot last, right? And it didn't, and it hasn't. Along with COVID, I suppose, although during COVID there were some very interesting activities in the auction houses as they adapted to COVID. They sold more, but on a lower level. What comes up or doesn't come up at auction is not so much a reflection of the market as it is a reflection of who's died or who's been divorced. And we are going to see, actually, in November in New York, there will be, I think everybody is looking at these sales as barometers, because there are some very, very good works of art, very fresh, as we say, fresh to the market, coming up from different collections, the late Leonard Lauder, the late Elaine Wynne, people who have bought good pictures. Now, they will sell, certainly. They will sell because the auction houses cannot afford to fail.
Sure.
So they'll be guaranteed, and that's why they will sell. But we will be watching, will there be active and furious or fast and furious bidding on some of those works? Is a work that's estimated at $100 million. If it just sells for $100 million, well, everybody says, whoopee, that's fantastic. But maybe that was only one bid, one person. If it sells for 115 or 120 or 125, whoa, that means 3 people wanted it, and that means people, I believe, have not lost money. The people who are buying in this area, they have not lost money.
Sure.
Without getting too specific, I think there's unrest in many parts of the world. When there is serious unrest, there is a psychological paralysis that exists. Maybe this is not the time. I've got the money, but maybe this is not the time to be seen spending $100 million on a picture. I don't know. Some people think like that, although not all sales are public by any means.
Right.
So I think that, I personally have mourned 2 or 3 or 4 dear friends of mine who've closed galleries that were theirs for 20 or 30 years, and they were good, solid, mid-sized galleries, but did they go out of business because, well, they were in their 80s and they'd no succession, or rents go up. I do believe, however, and it's kind of just to go back to the last 4 examples I gave, I do believe that there is a very strong energy, creative energy, which will flourish towards the middle of this century. And again, I'm not saying it's to flatter my host, but it's going to come out of this part of the world, right? And it is going to change the market. It is going to change the nature of the market. To some extent, it will change the way art is delivered. And I'm not saying the things are going to become, there may be artists who are going to become very, very rich, but because they're getting a lot of bites from a lot of people on their work, not because they're selling one painting for $100 million. So, and I've thought this for quite a long time. But the idea of art as a tangible asset, well, quite frankly, the people whose collections are coming up, some of the people whose collections are coming up for sale in November, that people are, I think, going to be hungry for, were exactly the type of old school collector that I was talking about, people who the husband who says to the wife, or the wife who says to the husband, we paid too much for that, but what the heck, we love it, and we're going to keep it. And that's the lot that goes through the roof 30 or 40 years later. Not the painting that somebody can boast about, well, I didn't pay as much as so-and-so for his, I only paid, $50 million for my Roscoe, and it's much better than his for 100, right? Well, it probably isn't, And if it's a bargain going in, it's a bargain going out. Sorry, that's a long-winded answer.
No, terrific. That's a fantastic answer. So in your view, the top end of the market and these sales that are coming up is still an important barometer for just the health of the market,
yes,
or the psychological well-being, I guess, that people feel toward art.
Rich people like to do what other rich people are doing. And if they think rich people stop buying art, well, they'll pause. Maybe they don't want to be, they want company.
Let me dig down a little deeper, though. There's as you well know, there are huge discrepancies in between primary and between primary sales and auction sales and pricing. And you can look at artists. Shara Hughes would be an example. There are a number where in 2022, works are selling for 500,000, many times more than that in some cases, that today at auction maybe would achieve 250. So that you're seeing that prices that were clearly much higher several years ago when the market was at the top, on the primary side of the market, they're not really achieving anything near that today at auction. Now, the reason this is interesting to me is because in Asia, and especially with a lot of Chinese clients, there's a bias toward auctions as a truer form of price discovery. There's a little bit of skepticism, or I would say more than a little, toward gallery pricing, and a sense that the auction is really the place where true prices are discovered. So how do we reconcile that? And I really want you to kind of think about this in the context of Asia. How do you talk to a Chinese, or how do you advise, let's say, a Chinese client building a collection? How do you navigate this gap that they're seeing today between prices achieved at auction and prices that were being asked by galleries just a few years ago?
Well, very good question, Derek.
That's not scripted, by the way.
No, I can give you a number of examples of moments in the art market which have been similar to this one. In the early 80s, there was the so-called painting generation in New York of artists like David Salle and Julian Schnabel and Eric Fischl, who emerged at the beginning of the 80s, and by 88, 89, they were selling for hundreds of thousands, not millions, hundreds of thousands, having gone from 15,000, right? Now, again, I'm not making any judgment about their work. Some of them never have they're still painting, they're still working, they're still alive, they're still good or bad or indifferent, but some of them have never reached those prices again at auction. David Salle, I think it was 17 years before he got a painting at $500,000. He sold one in 1988 at auction. So, I mean, I work for an auction house and I understand the business. Things come to auction because they need to be sold. They don't come to auction because they represent a group or a class or a type. Each auction result that people will look up on their, as data, treat as data, needs translation, it needs analysis, much more than the stock price of Tesla cars. They're all the same. But sunflowers are not all the same. Each sale, a private sale in a gallery, is a sale of a unique object between A and B, and it's the same at auction. So first of all, be very careful about how you treat the data. What is the data telling you? That one painting once sold for this amount, I believe that it's very difficult to have a conversation about price value without having a conversation about quality. And it's very difficult to have a conversation about quality because everybody has a different idea about what it is. So whether you're buying at auction or from a gallery, I was speaking to a friend of mine recently who had been advising a couple for 30 years. And he was introducing me to them. They were new to me, they were not new to collecting. And the wife said, so-and-so, I'll say Sam, Sam didn't let us buy a painting for 2 years. She said, he wouldn't let us buy a painting. Well, and they have a great collection. They bought slowly, and they looked, and they talked, and they bought books, and they read books, and they went to museums. I'm not talking about sort of intellectualizing it. I'm talking about they discovered what they liked. They discovered what they liked. They had a good advisor. And they were lucky to have a good advisor, someone who'd worked at a major gallery and was now retired, and let them find out what their... And there are some things that they said, yeah, well, that wasn't really a mistake. We still, you put it somewhere in the house, right? But you cannot just get a guru or a guide or an algorithm and buy what is going to go up in value. It doesn't work like that. It shouldn't work like that. So if everybody is buying a certain artist and those prices are, I don't know what expensive is anymore, but to me, expensive would be $150,000, $200,000. If you're spending more than $100,000, $150,000 on an artist who has no track record except everybody's talking about this artist, that's not a track record. That's a Ponzi scheme, excuse me. So you need, well, I'll give you a good example. I won't use a name. A young American artist at the age of 29 in probably 2019 or sold for $2 million at auction. $2 million, 29 years old, had a a top gallery, no museum shows, right?
That's unbelievable.
Ellsworth Kelly, right, recently deceased, who from the early 60s through his entire career was celebrated, bought by museums, museum exhibitions, commissions all over the world, his prices steadily rising. He was 88 when a painting of his sold for $2 million at auction, right?
Yeah.
So actually, that is totally sustainable, right?
Exactly.
Because if he's going to make another painting, it probably can sell for $2 million. There are enough people around to still buy them. Yeah. But if you're 29 and you've got $2 million, are you going to, for the next 40 years of your life or 30, how many paintings can you do a year? No, they're going to sell for $2 million. I mean, it doesn't.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. I mean, we have, Picasso's selling saltimbanques for 1,000 francs, right?
Yeah.
There's good money, and he's ambitious as an artist. Actually, he wanted it out and seen, right? And he made some money, but I don't know. It seems obvious to me that when these situations are being created, but I think it's over. I think that's over. I think go slow is probably, for a new collector, is the best advice. I mean, I'd say if you have enough money to seriously buy art, you should travel quite a lot. You should travel quite a lot, and you should go to galleries and museums in different cities. And you could go to Spain, and you could go to the Prado. You go to Madrid, and you could go to a gallery in Madrid, and you could see some young Spanish artist who is probably very, very good, and who might be $20,000 or something like that, and you might want to begin there, but not at this kind of top layer is fragile. It's of contemporary art selling for huge sums. It's fragile, and we've been there before.
So I want to pick up on this theme. I want to ask you a little bit about collecting from, let's start with the newer collector. This is a kind of conversation we have a lot in Asia. There are very seasoned collectors in this part of the world, but there are also people coming to the market for the first time in this part of the world. And when I first read The Value of Art, I read, as I told you one time, I read that book more than 10 years ago before we met and we talked about it. What I loved about that book is that you are, and you touched on it today, a passionate advocate for the social experience of art. And you tell this story in the book about being at the Seattle Art Museum. And you were there just looking at some young kids. I think they were 8 or 9 years old. And they're super excited. They're sitting in front of a Mark Rothko painting. Their teacher is there, and the teacher is asking them questions, and the students are just eager to raise their hands and answer the questions, and they're talking about the painting. And you write that the excitement was because the teacher was asking them some very simple questions. The teacher was asking, what do you see when you look at the painting? What does it look like? What does it make you think of? How does it make you feel? And I think in telling this story, you're saying that at least in the first instance, you don't really need to know anything about art in order to develop an appreciation for it, a basic appreciation for it. Right? Now, of course, with time, you can learn more and you can learn the history, you can learn the market history, and you can learn all that stuff. But to develop that fundamental appreciation for what you like and to discover what you like. Is that right? Is that a fair characterization of
Bonnet
your
Newman
view?
said the painting is in the seeing, not the talking. So it begins there. And it can end there. I preach against labels. Now, I'm not against labels per se. I'm against reading the label first and then deciding whether you want to see the painting or not. The label will give you one person's limited idea, and actually it gives you information about what's surrounding the painting, not what the painting is. So the teacher who says, and sometimes the teacher doesn't have to because the kids are already saying, that's a wave, it's a this, oh no, I see a monkey, or whatever it is. They're just kind of really excited. The teacher who stands, and I've seen this over and over again, the teacher who stands in front of the painting and says, what the artist means, right? What the artist means, what the artist did, right? They didn't mean anything. They did something, and they didn't write a poem. They didn't write a novel. They didn't sing it. They painted it, and that's it. That's what you got. So if that, at more than a glance, right? Give it more than a glance. If that hits any part of you, even disgust. Disgust is a pretty good response, I find too. Distaste, disgust, feelings of I mean, Rothko, I think, felt people who were disturbed by his paintings, they were right on. He didn't mind them being disturbed by them. He also wanted them to feel elevated too, I suppose. But your lens is not, your eyes to your feelings. Your brain is almost an interference, information. You don't need information right away. If you get fascinated by something, yes, find out who the artist is, what they did, and da-da-da-da-da. But don't look at it because someone has told you that Jean-Michel Basquiat was a groovy guy who liked jazz and his paintings go for $1 million. That's no reason to look at Jean-Michel Basquiat. The reason to look at Basquiat is because many of his paintings are really, really, really thrilling. They're as thrilling as movies can be thrilling. And you don't have to know anything. You know absolutely nothing. You don't have to interpret them because they are. You don't have to interpret. Are you going to interpret sunflowers? How can you interpret their sunflowers? I mean, look, it's not rocket science. I mean, I dropped out of school. If I can do it, anybody could do it. The problem is, one of the problems is, and I think it's a problem also that I have encountered in this part of the world, where I've encountered collectors who do believe that I have some secret knowledge. That I have secret knowledge about what is good, or secret knowledge about what is going to go up in value. And I don't. I promise you, I don't have any secret knowledge. I think your eye is as good as my eye for your feelings, but I want you to look and feel. And I mean, that's what people used to do, not so much now, when they went to galleries. When they went to galleries are free, they're free museums. And they'd come in and they'd sit down and they'd say to me, and these are active collectors, do you have anything for me? Anything you want to show me? They didn't come with a list. They didn't come with so I'm supposed to buy this because
they came to learn.
And I'd show that I'd pull out some paintings by Miro or Matisse, and then they'd buy one by Dubuffet maybe, or they wouldn't buy one at all. We'd spend 2 hours talking about pictures and looking at them. And I was learning, that's how I learned. I learned from collectors who were more knowledgeable and more mature than I was as a kid when I started. So, yeah, I don't know, I forgot the question. Did I answer it?
You answered it. You answered
Sorry.
it. In fact, you answered it beautifully. And I really think, I really want to thank you. This has been extraordinary.
It's a pleasure
And
for
I
me.
have 1,000 more questions I could ask you.
Well, I'll come back when the typhoon's
But I'd
over.
love to invite you back another time. This was absolutely
I'd
magnificent.
be delighted. Derek, thank you very much
Thank
indeed.
you so much.
No,
Thank
my
you so
pleasure.
much.
My pleasure. Truly.